And thank you. So a quorum being present, we do not have a quorum, excuse me. But this meeting of the SSA61 Hyde Park Commission is called to order pursuant to the applicable law, and my determination that attendance by remote means is necessary because an in-person meeting is not practical nor prudent to the declared public health disaster caused by COVID-19. This meeting is conducted via video conference. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the SSA website shortly. Good morning, everybody. Isaac, thank you for joining us. We're going to start with you. Can we review?
We have the SSA financials. Isaac, go ahead.
Yep, I just pulled them up.
Great. And Isaac, can you just lock this thing down so freeze it at row 7, so as you scroll down, you can keep the header?
Yes, sir. We got the instructions last time.
If you were to highlight that whole row on where the number 7 is.
Yep.
And then go to view on the top there. And where it says freeze panes, more, move over more. There you go. Just freeze those panes, not the top option. Okay. Thank you.
I owe you lunch on that. You just told me something. Thank you, sir.
Good.
I appreciate it. All right, gentlemen and ladies. So total cash in bank as of March 31st is 99,000 compared to 173. And because we have not received any 2023 tax payments, and Rod had informed us that that was going to be a little bit late. So everything is moving in that direction. So that's the difference right there. Receivables 221 compared to 294. So total assets at 321, 385 compared to 468,075. And that's all due to collections not coming in as they normally would in February and March. Correct, Rod?
Correct.
Okay. Coming down to our liabilities, accounts payables at 8,254. Last year was at 12,000. Deferred revenue was at 272. Due to SECC is at 5,728. So total liabilities at 286,670 compared to 288,839. Any questions with liabilities? Okay. Net assets, temporary restricted, 67 compared to 65. Net surplus, due to the fact we have no revenue, so it's all expenses for the first 3 months of 33,054 compared to a surplus of 113. And that all relates to not receiving our tax revenue. So total net assets at 34,000 compared to 179 last year. So total liabilities and net assets at 321, 385 compared to 468,075. Any questions on liabilities before we move over to budget versus actual? Okay. All righty, so budget versus actual. So no revenues for the month or for the year.
Do you mind locking down that row again?
Yep.
Highlight 7, go to view. You have to highlight the row first.
There you go. I'm gonna be a pro before it's over. All right. So expenses just 1.0. Website and social media is at 1,500 for the years 18, 2,700. So for the year, actual is 4,500 compared to month to date of 1,500. 2.0, garbage removal 2,762 compared to the year of 8,286. So there we go there. 3.0, zero expenses for the month or for the year. For 4.0, we did make out a payment for SSA of 1,381, and that's the amount for the year to date as well. 5.0, zero. 6.0, just have the bookkeeping, offers rent, equipment, and meeting. So the total of that is 972 compared to a budget of 1,498. Year to date is 2,954 compared to a budget of 38,597. Personnel, managers at 4,894. Year to date 14,682. Support is at 417. Year to date 1,012.51. Total for the year, for the month is 11,926. For for the years, 33,054. And like I said, that's due to the fact we have not received any tax revenues in the month of March. So I don't know if Raymond had a chance to take a look at the bank for April to see if any deposits.
Yes, I actually just looked at it.
Any
And
deposits?
since March 1st, we received $152,006.04.
You mean April? April?
I mean, April, I'm sorry, April 1st through the 13th.
How many, 100 what now?
152,006.
Okay. All righty, well, that's good news. So April.
And do we classify those deposits, Isaac, do we classify those deposits like if it was a tax for 2022 or 2023? You know, like,
Well, yeah, because Diane, that's a great question you raised.
how do we do that?
Because what happens is up here, you see this receivable? That 221. So they're receivable. So based upon the year that those deposits relate to, it's going to determine whether or not I'm going to decrease this receivable, right? Or is that related to 2023? If it relates to 2023, then I'm going to increase our income.
So
That's what happened.
receivables would be reduced if we receive funds that are owed to SSA from past years. And then if we get 2023 income, it goes into the income revenue.
Right. So Ramon gets these,
Thank
Ramon gets these tax receipts. On those tax receipts, it's going to have the year that those dollars relate to. So anything that's not related to 2023, then we reduce the liability, I mean, the receivable that's sitting out there. And anything related to 2023, that's current, and we'll book it in 2023.
They
And
send
that
it,
includes, does that
I'm
include
sorry,
if we would get a
Diane.
tax payment? Does that include if we would get a tax payment from like 2021 or something random?
Yeah, anything, because they always send you a
Okay.
tax receipt. And on that tax receipt,
Okay.
they're gonna let you know what year it relates to.
Okay, Raymond, sorry.
no, I was saying, I haven't received one in a while, Rod. I think do they upload it now?
Yeah, I need to take a look and see, Mark had sent me something to see that there was a tax disbursement. So I'll take a look at that. At this point, though, we're still basically through March 31st.
Yeah, so it's
So-
gonna be a hybrid of some 2022, 2021, 2020, and then majority of it be 2023.
Right. And well, what they did was everything that we were supposed to get for 2022 should have come 1/31/23. So everything after that should be 2023.
In a perfect world, if everybody paid on time, but you're gonna have always somebody that pays late. And so that will be the portion that we'll receive now, those who paid late.
Right. Yeah, and they give us guidance on late loss. And tell us the categories we need to put it into. So yeah, late loss. And I'll go over that in the work plan just a little bit. I think late loss usually comes for the next year because it's paid in the next year.
Yeah, at this point, it wouldn't be, you wouldn't write it off now because it's still fairly current. So at this point, we just would reduce the receivable. If it went past a year or 2 years, then they go into that category you're referring to, late loss, where you're gonna write it off.
Okay.
Since the,
Yeah, that one you and I need to have a little more conversation under because I'm not clear. I'm not as clear on your explanation. I just made an assumption from what the city was telling us. It kind of goes into the next year's budget. We carry it over into the next year's. So it's not counted so much as last year's or when they finally collected upon it. Because you can do late loss over a period of years. So they just.
You're absolutely right. So you put, you categorize receivables that become uncollectible that you may have to potentially write off.
Right.
Usually it's not after 30 or 60, 90 days. Usually, once it gets, 180 days, then that's what probably determine, hey, we may not receive this and therefore we need to go ahead and write this off. That's what I said, right? The ones that probably come in, the first 6 months, we're gonna use to write it down. It's usually after about a year. that
Okay.
We go ahead and charge it off into that late loss category. Like, so like if anything came in, like your 2020 or 2021 that has been paid, then all that is included in that late loss.
All right, you and I just have to have a deeper offline conversation because I'm
Okay,
not as
no problem.
clear on that. And I think it's just probably, I mean, I'm gonna let you go ahead and finish the report. You and I just need to have a deeper conversation.
Okay.
Rod, if the taxpayer doesn't pay this year, in the past years, they just pay late a year. But since this, our commission ends in 9 more months, well, is it possible we'll never get that money?
No, late loss should come in the year that it's paid. So since we're continuing as an SSA, or presumably, continuing, late loss will work every year, probably with the exception of next year for 2024. There is no late loss because it's a different SSA.
Right, that's what I'm asking. So we're not gonna get the money if someone pays late this year. Meaning if they don't pay this year, we're never seeing that money. We're never seeing the
Right,
2020.
right. From my understanding, we're not seeing it. Anyone that pays late, we're not seeing it just for that 1 year because it's a different SSA.
Right. And Isaac, do you mind scrolling to the bottom for a second?
Here, to the bottom? Okay.
Yeah, please. Once wait. Okay. Wait, sorry. Where's the month to date budget? Month to date budget total.
48,871.
Okay. So I understand that it's a seasonal business, and so the first quarter of our business, which is 25% of the days of the year, it's not going to be 25% of the total budget, which is 490,000. So I get that. The budget's only 41,000. We are still we're not spending that full amount that's budgeted, right? Am I reading this correctly?
You're correct. And that's usually because it's just a timing in your activity. So you start off slow because you don't have a lot of activity in that first quarter. So second and third quarter, that's when you start to spend more in those
Right.
2 quarters. And you
But
kind of
isn't
make
the
up for it.
41,000 reflecting that thinking? That's why it's, instead of being 125,000 or, whatever, 120,000, since our budget for the year is $500,000, we're only showing a budget of 41,000 for Q1.
Right,
That's for the month,
Greg,
Oh, for the month.
in
For the
terms
quarter.
of that, we just had contracts that were approved early this month. We had that meeting at the programming meeting, so those contracts are now taking effect.
Okay,
And you'll start to see that spending, but
okay, that's what I
to
want.
your point, you're right, to your point, the money in part hasn't been spent because the contracts haven't been executed. Since we approved those earlier, and we're looking to ask the commissioners to approve more spending for projects that comes up, you should start to see that.
Yeah, and just for everyone on the call, thinking about the first quarter of every year of the SSA is always a little slow because waiting for that first disbursement to pay any remaining bills that didn't, we couldn't disperse because of loss or late collection. There's always a little bit of a lag in the beginning. But it's going to start picking up. You're going to start seeing it.
Got it. Isaac, is there anything else left for you to report?
Yep, that's it right there. So for the quarter, Greg, it'll be this 122 for the first 3 months.
And yep, and it sounds like Rod, Diane, you guys are saying we've even though it's not reflected in here, we spent 122, close to something.
No, I'm not saying
We only spent 33.
Right.
We budgeted 122.
Okay, because right after the quarter closed, we signed a bunch of contracts that we normally would have signed a month earlier.
Right, we
Right.
ended up signing those, right, we ended up signing those in April.
Okay,
Or actually,
So-
right, they were authorized at the programming meeting because we had a quorum there. And then we were able to get those contracts out. The last one I just got signed yesterday because we needed to make sure that the documentation was where it should have been, but the amounts for the power washing, the sidewalk washing, that had been approved, and we're just getting that contract together, signed now. Diane signed it, and we're just gonna send it back to the vendor for his signature, and we'll get those dates.
got it. Thank you,
We'll be able to
Isaac.
execute that.
I guess,
Yeah,
okay,
but-
I just want, go ahead.
I was gonna say, but even though, you're probably not looking at recognizing those expenses until May.
We'll
Well-
recognize those expenses when they are billed. So May could possibly be when they start to show up, but some of them, they will send in billing for that. The power washing, they ask for a deposit up front. So you should see that one fairly soon, but the others tend to bill in arrears.
Okay, so
And I
These
think it's
contracts-
also important. Sorry,
these
Mike.
contracts these contracts you're referring to is what, landscaping, is power washing the streets? Or the
Banners.
streets, the sidewalk?
And then the
What else?
median will probably show up in May, start
Yeah.
showing up.
Well, no, because the medium, we're not even close, I thought, to getting
Well, like
proposals.
May, June, by the time we make a selection, then we'll have them start, you know? Oh, it's not, it's almost May. What am I even thinking? Sorry, probably like June. Why am I thinking it's still the beginning of the
Right.
day?
I guess
I'll say-
Fine,
But something
when
I
you're having
wanted to
fun.
say, was also to, Isaac used accrual counting. So sometimes how we budget like year-to-date expenses, it doesn't mean we're spending that amount every month. It's just how it's being recognized, because we know spending happens in the SSA based on season.
I think
So
the,
Diane-
that's all I
Diane,
wanted to
that's-
say. Is that
that's a-
correct, Isaac?
That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up because the SSA basis on a cash basis. So as we spend, then we recognize it, right? The budget itself is basically on assuming everything is going to happen in the same pattern, which we know it does not. And so that's why it's kind of lopsided, all right? So it just assumes that everything's gonna be 112, 112, 112. But the way the actual business works is not 112, 112. And so that's why you had this discrepancy right here. So right here, the budget is really, like I say, in a perfect world, everything will line up. But of course, we know we don't live in a perfect world. And so from a actual spending basis, when those events are going to take place or when we're actually going to experience those contracts, one is due to timing of signing contracts. And then the other piece is just dealing with programmatic piece. So we know that SSA, a huge portion of your programmatic and activities, that's going to take place during the summer months and then into the fall. And so that's when you'll see more expenses in the second and third quarter versus in the first quarter.
sorry, keep talking. I was just looking something up just to put a point on this.
Well,
And that's it
here's
for
what
me.
I see, right? If I can have the floor for a minute, is that for the first 3 months, we spent $33,000, and we know why, right? Because at the first quarter is always a very slow period for spending. So we've got $460-some thousand to spend between now and December 31st. If I were a commissioner, I would want to see some sort of plan for how that money is going to be spent, because it is such a large amount, and when it's going to be recognized. For example, I was looking at, there's a line item in here for $90,000 for public transportation, I think. Yes, public transit enhancements, 3.3. And the budget this year is $90,000. If I were commissioner, I'd want to say, okay, well, what is that? What is it and when's it going to be spent? And I don't, just so just so we can see that there's a plan. And I would encourage you guys to do that maybe sooner rather than later.
There is a work plan, Mike.
What's
There
that?
isn't a, there is a work plan that gets approved at the beginning.
Yes.
For each.
Yes, but
Please no.
but I'm not sure when that's going to be spent.
Yeah, so breaking it down of like projections is what
Yeah,
you're maybe
exactly. Greg,
So,
Greg,
Raj-
if you think I'm speaking if I'm
No,
speaking
Mike.
something you guys don't want, please
No,
stop me.
100%. No, I think you're on. Okay, so I just, we're on the same page because I just looked at last year's financials. So at the end of Q1, we will have, last year, we spent like 9% of our total budget. And right now we're tracking at the end of Q1 in 2023. I think we only spent like 6% or something, if I could do that math. So we're behind. We should be spending a lot more. And then I think it's becoming even a bigger problem this year because our budget is so much more. So what looks like a small problem today is going to be a very big problem in Q2. And if we don't see a plan to make sure we're spending it in Q2, then I think we would be not doing our job, right? We need to make sure that this money is all going to get spent because we lose it at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we should definitely come up with a Q2 through Q4 projection of spending. And I know Rod already has some of that templates from what he did last year. So he and I can prepare something for our next meeting.
And I'd also ask you'll need to take into consideration supply chain challenges that are still out there. Just to kind of give you an example, we're doing something here in Montgomery Place. I got the quote, and they're talking 14 to 18 weeks out. So now we're talking September, October for a project. If you have something that's a big spend that might be subject to supply chain, you might want to move that up on your priority list of when to start the project.
Also taking
Greg,
into consideration. Yeah.
Greg,
We're
I
also-
would suspect you're probably seeing the same thing for any project you guys do. I mean, supply chain is still kind of goofed up.
To that point, I don't think we'll be able to even spend the 90,000 landscaping project that we're hoping to do, given I think that those purchases have already been made, I think, but that's not my field anymore. But usually you buy that stuff in winter, so it gets delivered in the spring.
Right.
At Mac, at least.
So I think that's what I think the commissioners need to see as a plan, because the bottom line is there's a lot of money to spend, and they need to the commissioners need to make sure that that's spent efficiently and the way they want it spent. I think that the events of the weekend were a reminder about what's going on in Chicago. I think that I think the commissioners need to take a hard look at security again. And that might mean moving some things around in the budget. And I know there's a process for that, but I'm not sure what that process is. I think you got to go back to the city council to get any changes approved.
Only if it's a new budget line item, but if it's an existing budget line item in our work plan, not this, Isaac's budget matches the work plans in terms of the categories. So if we already budgeted security as a category, all we do, it's an internal decision that we make to shift funds.
Yeah.
And I think commissioners can approve that, not city council. But if we open a new budget line item, we'd have to get it approved through the council, which we don't plan to do in this last year of the existing SSA.
So you can move money around within each individual categories. You just can't create a new category.
Or raise
Correct.
revenue in the process of doing it. Because the work plans as they are approved as an ordinance. So you have flexibility to move things around in it. There are certain caps that we still have to explain to the city, and as long as we adequately explain that, that's fine within the categories. And as Diane said, we can't open up a new line item, but nor can we exceed the amount on our own, like it's what, 400,000, 490? We can't go to 492 without city council approval. That's what's called a budget amendment, as opposed, the others where you move it around is a budget modification.
Well, I do know that we're talking to people about reconstitution, that there's a lot of thoughts about security. And security means a lot of things. It might mean it's lighting. It might be hiring a security guard to drive around with their lights flashing. And again, based on the events this past weekend, I would think the commissioners might want to have a hard look at that. Unfortunately, Hyde Park and the district has a history with issues like that. Maybe not as ugly as that one turned out to be, because I think there were cars set on fire as well, but we've never seen anything like that. But we have witnessed Halloween with kids. We've witnessed, back in 2020, there was a big gathering of people at Lake Park and 53rd Street that was on the news. And to be honest with you, I think that drove, I'm confident it drove at least one major tenant away. So I think that it'd be my recommendation to the commissioners is, take a hard look at this budget, because if you want to make any changes, if you wait any longer, it might be too late.
Right. Security is something that's being looked at, especially in light of the 4th of July. And we're seeing that with Nichols Park as they're doing their planning for the 4th on 53rd Parade. And I think there's information that's getting all of us closer to that. But I know with Nichols Park, that was a big issue. No one knew what anyone was going to ask for in terms of security. And that figures into the money that they're asking from everyone else. They're anticipating a big jump in security, which means, in terms of our partners, when we put on or sponsor a music festival or anything, those things are going to come up again. So you're on the right track in terms of looking at security, because all of us are going to have to look at security in any of the events that we do.
And security in general.
Well, and also just for this committee, and I have mentioned this previously, but we were not funded. We did apply for the Corridor Ambassador Program through the city. And we've applied for several different sub-programs through the city to help offset some of our work. And the overall trend that I'm starting to feel is that we don't view Hyde Park as the same needs as some other communities. Because in my mind, a Corridor Ambassador Program would be boots on the ground, people around, or helping with visitors and, kind of being able to report things if they happen, but we didn't get funded for that. So it's not that we're not trying, like we are looking at other ways outside of SSA that we can contribute to the region. So I just want to put that out there for the committee to know that we have applied for those kinds of things. I think that often Hyde Park is passed over, unfortunately.
Yeah, again, that's even more reason why some of this money needs to be used for security. Correct.
So Rod and Rod, can you and I commit to working together to come up with a spending plan for this group for the next meeting?
Yes.
The spend down plan, and it'll obviously change throughout the year based on collections, because we're not going to spend what we don't collect. But I think the timing of what the important items to the commissioners based off of program committee, those priorities, and based off the commissioner meetings priorities, and then we'll go from there. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. And then in the meantime, Rod is getting these current contracts moving, so there will be some payments coming in May. And we are also finalizing some changes to our RFP for the median project. And so we're going to send it out to competitive bids. So that way we have a baseline comparative for the bid that we did receive from Clarence David for the median. so. That's where we're at. I know Jordan had to go. He messaged me. Others, questions, anything else? Do we want to review the budget tracker? I know George could not be on this call. I don't know why, but do we want to review the tracker?
I don't need to review it, but Mike, I mean, I look at this thing all the time, so I'm familiar. Do you want to look through it? You want us to pull it up, Mike?
No,
Okay,
no,
let's keep-
we've only
Yeah.
spent 11 grand, and that's,
Yeah,
you gotta be honest with you, I always look through the detail just to see where the money's going, so
yeah,
I don't,
Yeah.
I'm fine. I'm fine.
okay.
okay,
I think no new vendors in that detail list, if I can recall.
great.
No,
Okay, thank you very much, Isaac. I think we're ready for the, Rod, worksheet, 2024 budget worksheet presentation. Please.
Okay. Okay. Basically, I'm gonna go over this at a very high level. We just got this from the city last week. We went through budget training. And they went through, for new people, I was new to this for last year on what the budget is and how to fill it out. One of the questions I asked, and I think we discussed this earlier, was how we would be financed since our SSA is sunsetting. These are the 7 categories: customer attraction, tend to use that as marketing, public way aesthetics, sustainability, economic development, and business development. Mike, when you were talking about security, it comes out of budget item 4. This is a blank worksheet. This isn't ours actually, but this is the 2024 one. But I'll go through those categories briefly of where we put money and the projects we need to think about. The last 2, and we saw this with Isaac, SSA management and personnel. And those are office and personnel expenses. For 2024, and remember, it's got 2023, so everything's collected in arrears. What we will have is collectible levy, and we will have, I believe a TIF rebate was declared for 2023. So we should have money in these funds when our budget is configured for next year. I believe we may have late loss collection. I need to clarify that. But I know, Greg, you and I were talking about that. And this is something I'm going to have to work with Mark Roshan of the city. We did have conversations about it because I wanted to be clear of just where our money was coming from and actually when it comes, because the SECC might have to carry us until that first disbursement is given in August of next year. So going over the categories fairly quickly, I know this is small. I'm going to try and make some of this larger. We can see some of it and move it over. Some of the things we've traditionally funded: website, print materials. We don't do free Wi-Fi, social media, or decorative banners. These are the things that advertise our SSA to the neighborhood and the outer community.
Hey, Rod, do you mind if I just stop you for 1 second? We've seen this, I think, this template for 10 years now. I think we're pretty comfortable with it. Is there anything that's new that you want to highlight that's different? Because I don't want to make you have to like read
Nothing
what, you know,
new,
we've already seen.
Right. It's up to you all if you wanted to see it. I was just going to go over it fairly quickly. I know we've seen it for 10 years. It hasn't really changed.
I don't think you need to read to us the line categories.
Right.
Like we can read.
Yeah, it was just right. It was just going to be very
Yeah.
brief and very quick. But if everybody has a clear picture of this, the main thing I want to emphasize is the way we've kind of looked at our work plans, at least to me, is we've kind of looked a lot more at the finance, and that's important. But we also need to look at the projects that we're going to do. And we need to look at the goals that those projects we're trying to meet. And I'd like to look at it moreover as, let's say we're trying to get 10,000 people to come to Hyde Park or the corridor that didn't come last year. how are we going to use these 5 categories, aesthetics, sustainability, economic development, customer attraction? How are we going to use that to get 10,000 more people? How are we going to measure that? And how is that incorporated with our goals? We've looked at a lot of individual projects, and that's not bad. We've looked at the medians, we've looked at art, we've looked at litter abatement and all of that, but it's just, at the end of the day, I think they should be subject to a higher goal. We need to bring people to the business district. What's that number? How do we measure that success? And how does this work plan help us get there? So,
Yep.
any questions about that?
I have a comment, not so much a question, but for years we had funded every line item in order to give us, you guys, flexibility. And so, so we can be, we can evolve throughout the year and redirect resources to where we needed them at that moment. Okay, I think that was a mistake because I think it really took away the focus. And instead of saying to you guys, accomplish X, Y, Z, we've said like, here are 50 things we want you to think about. And I think that's just unfair and unproductive, and that we would make a lot more progress if we were making the hardest decisions up front about what are we going to focus on, and then you guys would have the budget to say, okay, more specifically here, we're going to focus on these 3 things, these 4 things, not 50 things.
Well, I mean, I can't speak to the past years. I can speak to last year. And it's in line with what I was saying earlier. We need to look at the SSA, I mean, kind of like we look at any governmental finance instrument. We need to say overall, what are the things we're trying to accomplish? SSAs are there to make a neighborhood stand out, so you can bring more people either to shop, or if it's residential, it's to pretty it up. It's to bring those extra services that the city is already providing to make the neighborhood unique for a purpose. It's like, what's that purpose? We have a commercial corridor. We want the businesses to prosper. We want to play a role in bringing more people to those businesses. So if we look at it from that higher level, I think all the other goals will fit into there and they'll make a lot more sense.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm agreeing with that. But I just, as you think about plugging numbers in here, the commissioners have given you guys five projects that they want to work on. And I think they've even reaffirmed that in finance committee meetings. So this whole budget should drive towards accomplishing those 5 things, or even if you can't get all 5, given the number we have, 2 or 3.
Right.
It was prioritized. So take the top 2 or 3. Okay.
I think we're saying the same things,
Yeah.
but I think those 5 things or 3 things or 10 things should be subservient to one goal. How do we make this area prosper more? And if that means we're trying to bring 10,000 more people than we brought the year before, if we're trying to go after, we say there's 1 million people coming to the Obama Center, we want 10,000 of them to stop in Hyde Park. How will those 5 things help us achieve that?
So you can do that with the customer acquisition budget. You can't really, that doesn't really help you decide how much to spend on the viaducts or how much to spend on Lake Park, because that's going to impact the quality of life, but that's not going to drive additional traffic to the neighborhood.
Okay.
In a quantifiable way.
Then we need to make that clear. Okay, if we want quality of life, the SSA can definitely be used for that. But the question is, how do we measure quality of life? At what point is quality of life better? I think it works when we have measurable goals that we can come back to you as a commissioner and say, okay, we're at point A. We put in this amount of time and resources to, for this project. Did it get us what we're asking for? I mean, for me, doing projects for the sake of doing projects, that it starts to become a little more difficult to be able to justify that. So when we get to a reconstitution or we get to a halfway point, it's just like, okay, we made this pretty, or okay, we brought in all of these people, but what are we really trying to accomplish with this? And I think we can make that more like the mission or the vision, and then everything else kind of serves in that. It makes what we're doing make a lot more sense.
I'm all up for the philosophical question about how to improve Hyde Park. But the commission has voted twice now, even 2.5 times, that there are 5 priorities that they want to accomplish. So we need a budget that is going to accomplish those priorities. And then I agree with you, we should set realistic goals, and they, you know, for how do you get a good result for those projects. But I don't think that we should fall into the trap of deciding like, what is the value of an SSA and how do you, what does value mean? I mean, those are great questions, but like you have a budget that's due, right, in 2 months. So in order to get a budget that I think the commissioners can approve, budget needs to reflect the priorities that the commission has set.
I mean, yeah, I think, you know, we're doing that, but I also think that there's times that some of those line items, they're not like full line items because they're always the tucked away money in the event we don't collect. So there's some of that comes into play, but I agree. And I think that we should focus in on the core areas that are being planned through the program committee. Anything else? So our next meeting will have some projections for this year's spending. Our next meeting will also have a work plan draft, right? Because that's coming up. Is that the timeline, Rod? The work plan draft would come to this committee next month because it's due in July.
Because it's due
It has to be
June.
voted on by the commissioners by what date?
The first
Then we work
draft
backwards.
is, the first draft is the 2nd of June. And then the final draft is the 15th. So we probably need to move up. No, actually, we have enough time to approve it at the June meeting. So we have May and June.
So we'll have a work plan draft ready for the next finance committee to discuss, right?
Mhm.
And we'll also, then you and I will also have our spending projections for this year for the next meeting. And then we're on track. Correct? Everyone in agreement?
Yeah, if you think it'll
Okay.
help your planning and you want to schedule like weekly meetings to make sure you guys are on track, I'm happy to meet and make sure. I'd hate, you know, we don't want to wait a month to get a budget that people weren't expecting. And then, you know, and then be forced to vote.
Well, and here's the thing, they won't be forced to vote because we're gonna have that draft work plan for you all at this next
That's
meeting.
right. If,
For 2 commissioners meeting.
yep. So I'm saying, so that draft, that recommendation that you're gonna make a recommendation, you're calling it the draft, but it's essentially, here's the recommendation at the next meeting, and then the follow-up meeting is a vote on it. So what you present in the next meeting needs to be what you guys think is the final, you know, what you're recommending as the final version. So if you want to meet
Right.
with me leading up to your recommendation, so we're all on the same page, let's do that. I don't want to, and if you don't need to meet, you don't have to.
Yeah,
But
we will definitely, as we get into this, we'll let the committee know if we need more input, but what we'll do is we'll look at the program committee, we'll look at all of the factors, draft a budget and have that definitely for this next meeting of this group. And then those recommendations can be made at that time for improvements prior to commission presentation. Right? That's how it works. But if you need help, if you would like to provide additional input, we're happy to share it. But Rod and I have the time.
Yeah, I'm not gonna micromanage it. I trust you guys to manage it. I just would say we meet once a month, this committee. So when you say, let's talk about it during our next meeting, it's almost too late. That's my
Well, the
point.
draft it'll be a draft, and then the committee makes recommendations prior to the committee, to the full commission. But if you
Well, we
feel
don't
like
have to
this
wait.
committee needs to meet, you don't have to wait,
think
is
we-
what you're saying.
I think what Greg is saying, we need to have a sense of urgency, and if we need to meet before a month, then we just need to plan it.
There is a sense of urgency to do this, because one, we want to make sure we reflect what all the commissioners want. The second thing is we're under city policy or state deadlines to do this. So the sense of urgency is always there. And we will meet that urgency.
And then the
Okay.
final doesn't even go to the city till July. So after we do the first draft, it's presented here, it's presented at the commission, we submit a draft to the city. Then they come back to us with any adjustments. Then we come back to the commissioners for the final in June,
Right,
prior to the July upload.
right,
Does that
yeah,
make
what we've
sense?
been
That's our
doing.
timeline.
Yeah, we've been doing this for about a decade now. I mean, nothing's gonna change with that. So,
Okay, are there any other questions or comments from our guests? Are you guys? Mike, we're gonna adjourn.
Sounds
Would you mind, I don't know how to do a two-person public meeting, but would you mind making a motion to adjourn then, Mike?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, as the only other commissioner, I'm going to second your motion. And since, so motion's going to pass. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate your time. We'll talk later.
thank you.
Bye.
Have a good
Thanks,
afternoon,
have a great
everybody.
day, everyone.
Have a good one.